The night was cold and silent. Only the wind moved through the tall grass. The human farmer Daniel sat inside his small wooden house. He was used to quiet nights, but this night felt different. It felt like something was moving outside, something that did not belong. Daniel stood up from his chair. He listened carefully. There, beyond the walls, he heard a faint rustle, like footsteps pressing down on dry soil. He narrowed his eyes and reached for the old lamp on the table. Then he stepped toward the window, pulling the curtain just slightly to peek into the darkness. At first he saw nothing, just shadows moving in the garden. The moonlight was weak, making it hard to see. But then his eyes caught it. Something was bending low near the rows of vegetables, a figure thin and small, hands shaking as it pulled carrots and greens from the earth. Daniel's heart beat faster. He thought maybe it was an animal, but no. This was no animal. It was a woman, but not human. Her skin had a faint pale glow, almost silver under the moonlight. Her hair was tangled, her clothes torn and dirty. She looked weak, like she had not eaten in days. He felt anger rise inside. Him? Someone was stealing from his garden. His garden was his hard work. Every seed planted, every row watered. It was his survival. He clenched his jaw, grabbed a stick leaning against the wall, and stepped outside. The air was sharp with cold. His boots crunched against the soil. The woman froze, her hands still clutching the vegetables. She had pulled. Slowly she turned her head, and in that moment, Daniel saw her eyes. Large, glowing softly in the dark, filled not with malice, but with fear and despair. "Stop right there," Daniel barked, raising the stick. His voice echoed in the silence. The woman gasped and stumbled back. The vegetables slipped from her thin arms and fell to the dirt. Her knees buckled, and she sank down, shivering. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, broken. "Don't hurt me." She lifted her trembling hands as if surrendering. Tears glistened at the edge of her strange, glowing eyes. Daniel stood above her, his chest tight with mixed feelings. He wanted to be angry, but her face told another story. This was no thief driven by greed. This was someone driven by hunger, by desperation. The woman lowered her head, pressing her forehead almost to the ground. "I did not mean harm," she said softly. "My children, they are hungry." Her voice cracked. "They have not eaten for 3 days." The word struck Daniel like a blade. He frowned, tightening his grip on the stick. He looked at her again, her fragile frame, her trembling shoulders. The dirt smeared across her face. She was not lying. He could feel it. "Children?" he asked roughly, trying to keep his voice hard. The woman nodded quickly, fearfully. "Yes. Please, I only took food for them. I will return it if you wish. Just don't call the soldiers." Her last words came with sudden terror, as if the thought of soldiers frightened her more than death itself. Daniel's breath misted in the cold air. His farm was isolated, but he knew well what the patrols did when they caught aliens stealing. They were beaten, sometimes worse, and anyone who sheltered them was punished as well. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The wind brushed past, carrying dry leaves, across the soil. The woman remained on her knees, waiting for his judgment. Daniel stared at her, conflicted. Should he drive her away? Should he call the patrols? Or should he listen to the broken voice that begged for mercy? A faint sound cut through his thoughts. From beyond the fence, in the line of dark trees, came a small cry, weak and thin, like the cry of a child. The woman flinched, her head snapping toward the sound. Daniel followed her gaze. His chest tightened even more. You really have children," he muttered under his breath. The woman pressed her hands together as if praying. "Yes, please. They are waiting for me. If I return with nothing, they will not survive the night." The sight of her kneeling in the dirt, her voice shaking yet filled with desperate love, made Daniel lower his stick. His anger had melted, replaced by something else. Confusion, pity, and a strange pull in his chest. He took a step closer. The woman flinched as if expecting a blow, but instead he only asked, "Show me." His voice was low but firm. If you're telling the truth, show me your children. Her eyes widened, hope and fear colliding in them. She hesitated, then slowly rose to her feet, still trembling. She bent down, gathered the fallen vegetables quickly with her thin fingers, and nodded. I will show you, please. Don't hurt them. Daniel said nothing, but inside his heart was heavy. He knew this choice could change everything. The night that had begun with silence and calm was now a night of questions, and as he followed the alien woman toward the dark trees, he could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far larger than he had imagined. The forest was darker than the garden. The branches of tall trees hung like silent watchers above them. Daniel followed the alien woman as she walked carefully, clutching the vegetables to her chest as if they were treasure. Her steps were weak, yet she forced herself forward, glancing back often to make sure the human farmer was still behind her. Daniel's lamp threw circles of light across the ground. Every crunch of leaves beneath his boots echoed loudly in the still night. His mind was torn. Half of him wanted to turn back, to let her go. The other half pushed him forward, whispering that maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe she truly had children starving in the dark. The woman finally stopped near a fallen tree. She turned, her eyes glowing faintly under the lamp's light. With trembling hands, she gestured toward the hollow beneath the log. Daniel leaned forward, his breath catching in his throat. Two small figures were curled together. Their skin was pale like hers, their bodies wrapped in thin rags that did little to fight the cold. One was older, perhaps 7 or 8. The other was much smaller, maybe 4. Their eyes opened slowly at the sound of footsteps, wide and fearful. Mother? The younger one whispered. Her voice was so weak it was barely a breath. The woman fell to her knees and touched the girl's cheek gently. Yes, my little one, she said softly. I brought something. She held up the carrots with trembling pride. The older child tried to sit up but was too weak. His ribs showed beneath his skin. His lips were dry and cracked. He stared at Daniel with suspicion, clutching his sister close as though to protect her. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen hunger before, but never like this, not even among the poorest humans in the village. These children looked as though death itself was already reaching for them. The woman turned back to Daniel. She pressed, her forehead to the earth again. Her voice shook with desperation. Please, I beg you, she said, do not turn us in, do not call the soldiers. They will kill me. They will take my children away. Please. We only need food. Just enough to survive. Her words echoed in Daniel's ears. He felt a strange heaviness. He had always lived alone. He had guarded his land, his crops, his survival. But now, kneeling before him, was a woman who was not human, begging for mercy not for herself but for her children. I cannot keep you, Daniel said roughly. His voice was harder than he felt inside. If anyone finds out, it will be my head on the block. Do you understand that? Yes, she whispered, nodding quickly. I understand, but I had no choice. I would rather die than watch them starve. Please, even if you cast me away, at least let them eat tonight. Her voice cracked at the end, and Daniel felt the sting of her words deep in his chest. She was ready to give up her own life if it meant her children could live a little longer. He looked again at the two small faces watching him, one full of fear, the other full of hope. The older child, still clutching. His sister suddenly spoke. His voice was stronger than his frail body suggested. Human, he said, his tone steady despite his shaking hands. If you want to punish someone, punish me, not my mother. She only tried to keep us alive. The words struck Daniel harder than any blade could. A boy so young, yet already ready to sacrifice himself. Daniel looked away, gripping the handle of the lamp tighter. He tried to keep his thoughts clear, but his heart betrayed him. Enough, he muttered, lowering his stick. He crouched down to look at them properly. His eyes softened. What are your names? The woman blinked, surprised by the question. Her lips trembled. My name is Lyra, she said quietly. This is my son, Kale, and my daughter, Nira. Daniel nodded slowly, repeating the names in his mind. Something about them felt permanent. Now, as if by knowing their names, he had already stepped into their lives, already accepted a bond he could not undo. Lyra leaned closer, her voice almost breaking. "I will work for you," she said quickly. "I can clean. I can cook. I can wash. I will never complain. I will be silent, invisible. Just let them live. Do not hand us over." Her plea was raw, full of desperation but also full of courage. Her eyes searched his face, begging for even the smallest sign of kindness. Daniel's thoughts raced. He remembered the faces of the soldiers, the punishments for hiding aliens. He imagined chains, whips, fire. He had seen what happened to those caught. If he helped them, he would be risking everything. But then he looked at the children again, Kyle's sharp eyes, Nira's trembling hands, Lyra's bowed figure. He realized he could not turn away. His humanity would not allow it. He let out a long, heavy breath. "Stand up," he said at last. His voice was still firm but softer than before. "Get the children. We cannot stay here in the open." Lyra's head shot up, her eyes wide with disbelief. You mean—" Daniel cut her off with a hard glance. "I mean, if we stand here any longer, the patrols will notice the light. Move." Hope and fear both flooded Lyra's face. She gathered her children quickly, lifting Nira into her arms while Kale staggered to his feet. Daniel turned back toward the farm, his jaw tight, his mind full of doubts. The night had started with a thief in his garden. But now, it was turning into something much more dangerous. Something he could never have imagined. And deep inside, he knew there was no turning back. The door of Daniel's small farmhouse creaked open as he stepped inside. The lamp's glow spread across the wooden floor. Lyra followed slowly, holding her little daughter close, while Kyle, the older boy, stumbled behind. His legs were weak, but his eyes remained sharp, always scanning as if danger lurked in every corner. Daniel motioned them in quickly and shut the door. He pressed his back against it for a moment, listening to the silence outside. Only the wind whistled through the cracks of the wooden walls. No soldiers, no footsteps. For now they were safe. "Sit there," Daniel said firmly, pointing toward the small table at the center of the room. His voice was rough, but not cruel. Lyra hesitated, almost afraid to move, but then guided her children forward. She placed Nira carefully on the bench and sat beside her, while Kale slid down onto the seat with a heavy breath. Daniel's eyes narrowed as he looked at them. The children were worse than he thought. Their arms were thin as twigs, their cheeks sunken. Their clothes were not clothes at all, just torn fabric tied together. He clenched his jaw, trying to push away the uneasy ache rising in his chest. Without a word, he walked to the corner where he kept his supplies. From a small cupboard, he pulled out bread, dried meat, and a jug of water. He placed them on the table. The smell alone made Nira's tiny nose twitch, her wide, glowing eyes fixed on the bread as though it were the most precious jewel in the universe. "Eat," Daniel said simply. For a moment, no one moved. Lyra looked at the food, then at Daniel, her lips trembling. This is too much," she whispered. "We only needed a little to survive the night. We cannot take—" Kale cut her off with a hoarse voice. "Mother, please." His hands shook as he reached forward. He tore a small piece of bread and placed it first into Nira's hands. The little girl held it like treasure, then bit into it. The crumbs fell down her chin, but her face lit up with life. Daniel stood back, watching. He said nothing. His eyes shifted between the mother's trembling gratitude and the children's desperate hunger. Kale ate next, slowly, as though afraid the food would vanish if he moved too fast. Lyra did not touch a single piece. She kept pushing the food toward her children, whispering softly, "Eat, my loves. Eat." Daniel frowned. "You should eat, too," he said gruffly. Lyra shook her head quickly. "They need it more than I do. A mother's hunger is nothing." Her words were quiet but filled with strength. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something stir inside him, something he thought he had lost: respect. He had seen humans steal, cheat, even kill to save themselves. But here was an alien mother, giving up her own chance to live just so her children could take another breath. Minutes passed as the small family ate. The sound of chewing and soft gulps of water filled the silence. Slowly, color returned to the children's faces. Neera leaned against her mother, eyes half closing from both exhaustion and the comfort of being full. Cale sat straighter now, though his eyes still darted toward Daniel with caution. When they were done, Daniel finally sat across from them. He rested his elbows on the table, studying them. "You cannot stay here long," he said. His voice was firm but carried no anger. "If anyone finds out, we are all finished." Lyra lowered her gaze. "I know," she whispered. Her fingers stroked Neera's hair gently. "But even one night of safety is more than I hoped for. You saved us. Even if tomorrow brings death, I will not forget this kindness." Daniel leaned back, frowning deeply. He didn't like her words. They sounded final, as though she expected to vanish by morning. He hated the idea of soldiers dragging her and the children away. He hated the thought of those glowing eyes closing forever. Cale spoke suddenly, his young voice calm but heavy. "Why did you help us?" He looked directly at Daniel, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "Humans do not help our kind. They spit at us, chase us, call us thieves. Why are you different?" The question struck Daniel harder than expected. He opened his mouth, but no answer came at first. Finally, he muttered, "Maybe I'm a fool." He glanced at the children, then at Lyra. "Or maybe I just couldn't stand to watch a mother beg for scraps while her children starved." Cale tilted his head, studying him with those strange, glowing eyes. For the first time, the boy gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement. The night stretched on. Daniel gave them blankets, though they were old and thin. He watched as Lyra wrapped both her children tightly, her arms around them. Her eyes stayed open long after they closed theirs. She kept glancing toward Daniel, not with fear now, but with something else. Cautious hope. Daniel sat by the window, the lamp dimmed low. His stick rested against the wall. He stared into the darkness outside, his thoughts twisted with doubt. He had broken rules tonight, rules that could cost him everything. But when he turned his head and saw Neera sleeping against her mother's chest, a faint smile on her face, and Cale's hand still holding a crust of bread like it was treasure, Daniel knew one thing with certainty. He could not turn them out, not now, not ever. And though danger loomed outside, something inside his heart whispered that this night was not the end. It was only the beginning of a fight much greater than he had ever faced before. The first light of dawn crept through the cracks of the farmhouse walls. Daniel had not slept a single minute. He sat in his chair near the window, eyes fixed on the horizon. Every sound outside, every creak of wood, every rustle of leaves, made his muscles tense. Behind him on the old bed, Lyra and her children lay wrapped in blankets. Neera was curled against her mother's chest, Cale beside them holding his sister's hand. Their breathing was slow and steady, soft sounds of peace after nights of hunger and fear. Daniel rubbed his tired eyes. His mind wrestled with the truth. He had taken them in, he had fed them, and now he could not simply throw them out. But if anyone discovered them here, if a patrol soldier knocked at his door, he would be finished. They would drag him through the village as a traitor, and the punishment was always public. He clenched his fists. The image of Lyra kneeling in the dirt, begging for her children's lives, would not leave him, nor would the memory of those glowing eyes staring at him in the night, desperate yet full of strength. As the sun climbed higher, Neera stirred first. Her little voice broke the silence. "Mother, it's warm here," she whispered, pressing closer to Lyra's chest. Daniel's heart tightened at the sound. He had lived alone for so long that he had almost forgotten the softness of a child's. Words. Cale rose next, sitting up slowly. His sharp eyes scanned the room as if measuring every danger. When he noticed Daniel watching, he straightened as if to show he would defend his family if needed. Lyra opened her eyes last. She blinked at the light, and then at Daniel. Her expression was cautious, almost guilty. "We will leave soon," she said softly. "Before anyone sees us, you have already done more than enough." Daniel leaned forward in his chair. His voice came out rough. And where will you go? Back to the forest? Back to starving? Lyra lowered her gaze. If that is our fate, then so be it. At least my children ate last night. Her hand stroked Nira's hair gently. I cannot bring more danger to your door. Human law is clear. Helping us is a crime. Her words struck deep, but Daniel could not ignore the anger rising inside him. He slammed his hand against the arm of his chair, making them all flinch. Damn the law, he muttered. What kind of law punishes a mother for feeding her children? Lyra stared at him, shocked by his defiance. Kyle's eyes widened too, but there was something new in them now. Not only caution, but also a flicker of respect. Daniel stood and walked across the room. His boots thudded against the floor. He opened the cupboard again and pulled out more food, placing it on the table. Bread, dried beans, and water. Eat again, he ordered. You need strength. Lyra shook her head quickly. No, I cannot. But Daniel cut her off, his tone sharp. I didn't ask. Silence filled the room for a moment. Then Cale reached out first, taking a piece and handing it to his mother. Please, the boy said. You must eat too. His voice, though young, carried the same weight of command Daniel's had. Lyra's eyes glistened as she finally took the bread. For the first time, Daniel saw her eat, each bite careful, as if she feared it would be snatched away. When the meal was done, Daniel sat again, folding his arms. His voice was calmer now. You cannot stay in the open. You cannot wander the forests. The soldiers will find you, and if they don't, hunger will. He leaned forward, his eyes hard. You will stay here. The words hung in the air like thunder. Lyra froze, staring at him in disbelief. Stay? But if they discover us, Daniel interrupted, then they'll have to get through me first. His voice was low but strong. I won't hand you over, not to them, not to anyone. Lyra's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Her glowing eyes shimmered with a mix of gratitude and fear. Cale's fists clenched at his sides, his young voice breaking through. Why would you risk yourself for us? Daniel's face hardened. He turned toward the window, staring at the village roofs in the distance. Because no one else will, he muttered. And I'm tired of watching cruelty win. The room went silent again. Only the sound of wind, pushing against the walls, filled the space. Finally, Lyra whispered, You are either very brave or very foolish. Daniel gave a humorless smile. Perhaps both. But already, the weight of his choice pressed on him. The risk was real. He knew the neighbors were nosy. He knew the soldiers patrolled often. Already, he imagined whispers, spreading. Why was Daniel buying more food? Why was his house lit at strange hours? Still, when he looked again at Nira, who was smiling faintly in her mother's arms, and Cale, who sat taller now that his belly was not empty, Daniel felt something stronger than fear. Resolve. Lyra placed a hand over her heart, bowing her head slightly. I do not know how to repay this, she said, but I will never forget it. Daniel waved her words away. Repay me by surviving, he said simply. Outside, the sound of footsteps on the dirt path suddenly reached his ears. Daniel stiffened, his hand reaching instinctively. For the stick leaning by the wall, he glanced at Lyra, her eyes wide with panic. She pulled her children close, holding her breath. The footsteps passed, fading into the distance. Relief swept through the room like a silent tide, but the warning was clear. Their danger was not imagined. It was real. Daniel tightened his grip on the stick, staring at the door. He had made his decision. There was no turning back now. He would protect them, no matter the cost, and deep inside he knew. This decision had changed everything, not only for Lyra and her children, but for himself as well. Days passed, but Daniel's farmhouse no longer felt the same. The quiet life he once had was now filled with whispered voices at night, footsteps on the floorboards, and the sound of children breathing under his roof. Lyra worked silently, cleaning and cooking with careful hands, while Cale tried to help Daniel with small tasks outside. Nira laughed softly at times, though Lyra always hushed her quickly, reminding her that too much noise could bring danger. At first, no one noticed, but soon the changes began to show. Daniel, who once bought only enough food for one man, now carried twice as much from the market. He visited the butcher more often, and sometimes he purchased extra blankets. The shopkeepers raised their brows but said nothing. People in the village, however, had sharp eyes and sharper tongues. Strange, one neighbor whispered as Daniel passed. Why does he need so much bread? Another muttered, maybe he's hiding something. That man never talks, never smiles. Now suddenly he looks different. Rumors spread quietly at first, like smoke under a door. Soon they grew into sparks of suspicion. Some villagers believed Daniel was hiding stolen goods. Others whispered about illegal trade. But one word, dangerous and poisonous, began to circulate. Aliens. Daniel felt the eyes on him every time he walked into the market. He noticed how conversations stopped when he entered, how neighbors tilted their heads as if trying to listen to his secrets. He forced himself to stay, calm, to act normal, but inside his chest the pressure built heavier each day. One evening, as he returned from the village with a sack of food, he saw old man Joran, a neighbor with a crooked back and a sharper tongue, standing by his gate. Joran's narrow eyes studied him with suspicion. "You eat a lot for a man who lives alone," Joran said casually, leaning on his cane. "Or maybe you don't live alone anymore, Daniel's jaw tightened. He forced a small shrug. "Hard work needs strength," he replied simply, pushing past the man. But Joran's eyes lingered too long, watching him disappear into the farmhouse. Inside, Lyra stood frozen by the window. She had seen the neighbor too. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "They are starting to suspect." Daniel set the sack on the table, his face hard. "Let them talk," he muttered, though his heart told him the danger was closer than ever. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Lyra approached. Daniel quietly, "You should let us go," she said softly. "The risk is too great, we cannot destroy your life." Daniel looked at her, his expression dark. "And where would you go? Back to starving? Back to hiding in the dirt?" "No, you stay here." His voice left no room for argument. Lyra lowered her head, tears glistening in her eyes, but she said nothing more. The following days became heavier. Daniel noticed soldiers passing through the village more often, their boots striking the ground like thunder, their sharp eyes scanning faces and houses. He wondered if someone had already whispered about him, if Joran or another neighbor had spoken of their suspicions. Kyle noticed it too. One morning as they worked in the garden together, Kyle's small hands pulling weeds while Daniel watered the soil, the boy asked quietly, "Why do humans hate us so much?" His glowing eyes looked up at Daniel, full of a pain that seemed too heavy for a child. Daniel paused, his throat tightening. "Not all humans hate you," he said slowly. "But fear makes people cruel. They fear what they don't understand." Kyle's jaw set in a firm line. "Then I will make them understand," he said softly, almost like a vow. That night, the danger drew even closer. A knock came at the door just after sunset. Daniel stiffened, his hand going to the stick by the wall. Lyra pulled her children behind her, fear flashing in her eyes. Daniel opened the door only slightly, and there stood Joran again, his crooked smile spreading across his face. "Evening, Daniel," he said, his voice slow and oily. "Strange sounds coming from your place at night. I thought I'd check if everything's all right." Daniel forced his expression flat. "Everything's fine," he said curtly. "You must be. Hearing things, old ears can play tricks." Joran leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Maybe. Or maybe you've got company. You know the patrols pay well for news of unregistered guests." The threat was clear. Daniel's blood ran hot. He gripped the door tighter. "Be careful with your words," he said coldly. "Accusing a man without proof can be dangerous." For a long moment, Joran studied him, then chuckled darkly and shuffled away. But Daniel knew. This was not over. He shut the door firmly and turned to Lyra, who stood pale and trembling. "He suspects," she whispered. clutching Nira close. Kale's eyes were wide with silent rage. Daniel ran a hand over his face, his voice heavy. Then we must be smarter. No lights after dark, no noise, no stepping outside. We stay hidden, understand? Lyra nodded, but the fear in her eyes was not only for herself, it was for Daniel too. He had tied his fate to theirs. And now every whisper, every glance from a neighbor, every knock at the door carried the shadow of danger. That night, as Daniel lay awake, listening to the quiet breathing of the alien family in his home, he knew the truth. His decision had chained them together, and while kindness had brought them here, suspicion was already circling like wolves outside his door. The night was heavy with silence, but Daniel could not rest. He sat by the window, staring at the dark path that led to the village, his gut twisted with unease. Joran's words still echoed in his ears. That man's crooked smile had not been idle curiosity. It had been a warning. Inside, Lyra held her children close. Kyle tried to keep his eyes open, but exhaustion finally pulled him into uneasy sleep. Little Nira clutched her mother's torn sleeve, whispering softly even in her dreams. Daniel watched them, his jaw tight. He had made his choice, but he knew every choice demanded a price. It came sooner than he expected, just before midnight. The sound of boots struck the ground outside, harsh and in rhythm. His heart leapt. He blew out the lamp instantly. The farmhouse fell into darkness. Lyra froze, her eyes wide with terror. The knock came, loud, cruel, the sound of fists against wood. Open up! A soldier's voice thundered. By order of the patrol, Daniel of the East Farm, open the door. Daniel's chest burned. He gripped the stick by his side. His eyes met Lyra's. She clutched her children tighter, shaking her head in silent plea. The soldiers did not wait. With a crash, the door swung inward. 4 armored men stormed inside, their eyes cold and sharp. Torches lit their faces. Joran stood behind them, his grin twisted in triumph. I told you, Joran sneered. The man hides something. Check his house, you'll find them. Daniel's blood boiled. He stepped forward. You dare break into my home at night? He growled. His voice carried anger, but his heart pounded with dread. The soldiers ignored him. 2 men began tearing through the cupboards. Another flipped over the blankets, searching. Lyra pressed her children against the shadows in the far corner, praying the darkness would hide them. But Nira, frightened by the crash of wood, let out a small whimper. One soldier turned his head sharply. His torchlight caught the faint glow of her eyes. Here, he shouted, raising his hand. Aliens? The room erupted. Soldiers rushed toward the corner. Lyra screamed, shielding her children with her body. Daniel's fury burst like fire. He swung his stick with all his strength, cracking it against a soldier's helmet. The man stumbled, cursing. Another lunged at Daniel, but Daniel shoved the stick hard into his chest, sending him back into the table. Run! Daniel shouted at Lyra. Now! Lyra gathered Nira in her arms, pulling Kale by the hand. They dashed toward the back door. Soldiers shouted. Chaos filled the farmhouse. One lunged for them, but Daniel threw himself forward, tackling the man to the ground. His fist struck. His stick splintered, but he did not stop. He fought with the strength of a man who had nothing left to lose. Lyra burst through the back door into the night. The forest loomed ahead. Kale's small feet stumbled, but he pushed forward, clutching his sister's arm. Lyra's lungs burned, but fear gave her wings. She could hear Daniel's voice behind her, shouting, the clash of wood and steel. Go! He had yelled. Don't look back. But she did just once. Through the doorway she saw him, blood on his face, swinging his broken stick like a weapon, holding back men twice his size. For them, for her children, he was standing against death itself. Tears blurred her vision as she fled into the trees. Branches tore at her skin. Nira cried softly in her arms. Kale gasped for breath but did not slow. Behind them, voices shouted, boots pounded, torches lit the forest with chasing fire. Daniel staggered as a soldier struck his side, pain ripping through him, but he snarled and pushed back. He slammed the man into the wall, grabbed another by the collar, and head-butted him until blood poured. His arms ached, his vision blurred, but his rage gave him strength. "Cowards," he roared. "You'll not touch them." One soldier raised his blade, but Daniel kicked the table hard, sending it crashing into him. For a moment, the path was clear. He grabbed the nearest torch and hurled it across the room. Flames licked at the wood, smoke rising. The soldiers cursed as fire spread. Daniel bolted through the back door, clutching his ribs. His boots hit the soil, and the cold night air filled his lungs. The forest swallowed him as he ran after Lyra and the children. Ahead, Lyra stumbled, but kept going. Kyle turned his head, spotting Daniel running toward them. His young voice shouted, "He's coming!" Hope flared in Lyra's chest. But the chase was not over. The soldiers burst from the farmhouse, their torches like glowing eyes in the night. Their voices echoed. "Don't let them escape. Bring the alien filth and the traitor back alive." Daniel reached Lyra, grabbing her arm. "This way," he hissed, pulling them down a hidden path he had used since childhood. A narrow trail through the rocks known only to him. They crashed through brambles, their breath ragged. The soldiers' shouts grew fainter behind them, but not gone. The hunt was still alive. At last, the trail opened to a small clearing, the trees thick above them, hiding the stars. Lyra collapsed to her knees, holding her children close. Her body shook with sobs. Daniel bent over, clutching his side, every breath like fire. But they were alive. For now, they had escaped. Lyra looked at Daniel, her eyes shining with tears and disbelief. "You risked everything," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why? Why would you do this for us?" Daniel, gasping, wiped blood from his mouth. His voice was hoarse but steady. "Because no one deserves to die hungry," he said. "Not while I can still fight." In that moment, Cale's small hand gripped Daniel's arm. The boy's glowing eyes filled with fierce respect. "You are not like the others," he said quietly. "You are different." And though the night was far from over, though danger still hunted them, in that clearing a fragile bond had turned unbreakable. The farmer and the alien family were no longer strangers bound by chance. They were allies, bound by survival. The forest was quiet now. The sound of boots and shouts had faded into the distance. Smoke from Daniel's burning farmhouse rose faintly into the night sky, a dark reminder of the price he had paid. He leaned against a tree, his chest rising and falling heavily, every breath cutting through his ribs. Lyra crouched nearby, still holding Nira tight while Cale pressed close to her side. For a long time, none of them spoke. They were too tired, too shaken. The only sound was Nira's soft whimpers as she buried her face against her mother's chest. Daniel's hand tightened around the stick he still carried, splintered and blood-stained. It had saved their lives, but it could not save his home. At last, Lyra raised her head. Her glowing eyes reflected the faint firelight in the distance. Her voice trembled. "You lost everything because of us." Daniel's gaze shifted toward the smoke. His heart ached. His farm had been his life. Years of work gone in one night. Yet when he looked back at the alien woman and her children, something inside him pushed the grief aside. He shook his head slowly. "Not everything," he said quietly. "You're alive, that is enough." Cale clenched his small fists, his young face hard. "We should fight them back," he whispered angrily. "The soldiers, the neighbors, all of them, they will never stop hunting us." Daniel knelt beside the boy, his rough hand resting on Cale's shoulder. "One fight at a time, lad," he said gently. "Survival is the greatest fight. As long as you breathe, you win." The boy's glowing eyes softened. He nodded, though his anger remained. By dawn, Daniel guided them deeper into the forest. He knew of a hidden cave near the cliffs, a place where smugglers once hid goods. It was far from the patrol, roads with water nearby and shelter from the wind. They reached it just as the sun rose, golden light spilling across the trees. Inside the cave, the children lay down on blankets Daniel had managed to grab before the farmhouse burned. Lyra placed her hands on the cold stone floor, whispering softly in her own language, a prayer of gratitude and sorrow. When she finished, she turned to Daniel. Her face was pale with exhaustion, but her voice carried strength. "You should not carry this burden alone," she said. "I will work. I will hunt. I will do whatever I can. But promise me you will not throw your life away for us again." Daniel's tired eyes met hers. He gave a small, rough smile. "Too late for promises," he muttered. "I already threw my life away the moment I opened my door to you." Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not look away. Instead, she whispered, "Then we will build a new life together, not just for us, but for you too." Days turned into weeks. The cave became their home. Daniel taught Cale how to fish in the nearby stream, and Cale, though young, showed fierce determination. His hands grew stronger, his back straighter. He was no longer just a hungry boy. He was becoming a survivor. Nira brought laughter back to their lives. She followed Daniel everywhere, tugging at his sleeve, asking questions in her small, curious voice. Sometimes she even tried to help, though her tiny hands could barely hold a fishing line. Each time she smiled, Daniel felt a warmth he had not known in years. And Lyra, she kept her word. She worked, tirelessly gathering herbs, repairing clothes, keeping the cave clean and safe. But more than that, she watched Daniel with eyes full of unspoken gratitude. Every time their gazes met, there was something more between them, something neither dared to name yet. The world outside still carried danger. Soldiers searched, rumors spread. But Daniel no longer felt like a man alone. He was no longer just a farmer with an empty house. He was protector, guardian, and though he would never admit it aloud, part of a family. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with fire, Cale sat beside Daniel near the cave entrance. "When I grow up," the boy said, his voice firm, "I will protect you like you protected us." Daniel looked at him surprised. "Protect me?" he asked with a rough chuckle. "I thought I was supposed to be the strong one here." Cale shook his head. "You gave us more than food. You gave us life. I will never forget." His glowing eyes burned with determination. Daniel's chest tightened. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Then maybe there's hope for this world after all," he said softly. Inside the cave, Lyra listened, a faint smile touching her lips. For the first time in years, she felt something other than fear. She felt the beginning of a future. That night, as the stars shone above and the forest wrapped them in silence, Daniel lay awake, listening to the soft breaths of the children, the gentle rustle as Lyra shifted beside them. His home was gone. His old life was burned away. But something greater had risen in its place, a bond stronger than blood, a family not made by birth but by choice. And though danger would come again, though the world outside was cruel, inside that cave there was warmth, hope, and a new beginning. For the first time in a long time, Daniel closed his eyes and let sleep take him, not as a lonely farmer, but as a protector who had found something worth living for.